ayes have it. Members, we now come to the clauses 1 and 2. The question is that clauses 1 and 2 stand part. I call Claire Curran.
Mr Chair, I think just to reiterate the support that Labor has for this bill, which is, I think what we have done throughout this discussion and throughout the debate around the first reading and through the select committee hearings is that we heard from a broad spectrum of voices from the accountancy, audit and professional services around this accountancy infrastructure reform bill, that it appears to be quite straightforward, and in a lot of ways it is. It does make some general changes that make the accounting and audit industry with the intent of making it more efficient and effective. And I think it's part of a spectrum of measures which the Commerce Select Committee works quite cooperatively around to take a common sense approach to the way that the financial systems operate and to try and to bring some accord between particularly the New Zealand and Australian ways that this operates. 5 particular law changes included in this bill to reduce restrictions on the legal form for audit firms, to provide that charities assurance, which I know that my colleague Mr Nash has some reservations around. There was quite a degree of consideration around the charities, the changes to charity audits in the bill, and the bill requires charities over a certain size to have their financial statements that are assured by a qualified auditor, and many charities of that size, the large size, already obtain assurance, and these provisions make that compulsory. So what is actually happening is that it's being made compulsory and ensuring that the quality of the assurance of those companies of that size, of those charities of that size, are brought about by requiring them to be performed by a qualified auditor using the correct audit statement standard. And the third thing that it does is that it means that members of accredited bodies perform statutory audits. And I think, from my perspective, that's one of the most significant parts of this bill, that members of accredited professional bodies be allowed to perform most statutory audits if they're recognised by their professional body as qualified to do so. And I think what that does is will actually bring about that efficiency. The only rider to that is that there is an exemption, and there's an exemption on religious grounds, which is most unusual. We don't see that in most legislation, or any legislation in my experience, that has come before the House, and how that will actually play out and what the implications of that are, especially given that we're talking about auditing, an auditing function which is a position of great trust. So I'm yet to be fully convinced that that is actually going to that the legislation is actually going to provide the protections that are necessary to those bodies being audited, and to the general public really having confidence in the system. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it, I'm just expressing some unease still around that. Fourthly, that qualified accountants perform statutory accounting roles, replacing references to chartered accountants in various acts with qualified accountant, where the context relates to specifying who can perform those accounting related statutory roles, and in order to include the qualified members of accredited bodies. And then there was the changes to the New Zealand Institute of Chartered Accountants Act 1996, which are necessary to ensure that that agreement to join the Institute of Chartered Accountants in Australia in a combined new Trans-Tasman Institute. I suppose in relation to that it made sense. There's no doubt about that. There was wide agreement, not complete agreement.
Clear. I'm going to call Stuart Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm only going to make a very short